Good evening and welcome to this, the third in 6 sessions of Understanding Cinema online. Good evening, Sandra Kennedy. Good evening, Kate. Hello to you both. How are you doing? I can see you there as well. Nice to see you. Hi. Excellent. Nice bit of cheddar. I asked Fraser, who's in the session as well, what his favourite type of cheese was there in the corner, and he says, a nice bit of cheddar. Thank you very much. Sandra and Kate, nice to see you. Can I ask you to please put into the chat menu there on the side your favourite type of cheese as well, if possible, please, so that way you get to say it to Fraser. Thank you. Excellent. Nice to see you. If it's okay, can we put our microphones down for the moment as well, if that's all right? Thank you. And then we can sort of bring them back up. I'll ask you questions individually if it's okay to bring them back up, and then that'd be fantastic. Hamagafai can you. Right, so we've got a new person joining us this evening as well, Sheena Watson. So hello to Sheena if you're watching. Nice to see you. And Mark's with us as well. Fantastic. Great. Fantastic. Good evening, Mark. How nice to see you again as well.
Hello, Alistair.
How are you doing? Excellent. So that's great. We've got a full house of people in. This is fantastic. We've got Mark from the down in London, and we've got Kate, who's a filmmaker based in Glasgow. We've got Sandra, who's a filmmaker based on the island of Lewis. We've got Fraser, who's head of computing as well. Oh, Crowdy, fantastic type of cheese from Sandra there, and Kate, very nice, very good. I would say for myself, it would have to be a Comte. I must admit, a wee bit of French cheese. And Mark, if you'd like to put your favourite type of cheese there into the chat window as well, it's a way of creating a small cheese-based community. Thank you.
I'm a long way from choosing a favourite cheese. Oh dear. Yeah, carry on. Yeah.
So, if you're watching on YouTube later on, this is the third in 6 sessions of the Understanding Cinema project from the Centre for the Moving Image in Edinburgh and the BFI in London, looking at l'intervalle, the distance, as a topic in terms of how can you use this as a filmmaker? How can you work with groups, particularly with young people, and use this for the development of their film work? Training comes from the Cinémathèque Française, their Cinéma 100 ans de jeunesse project, which has been running for 20 odd years now. The previous 2 sessions we've looked at various different types of interval, and in this session we're going to look at kind of dynamics as well. How do things work dynamically? So to start us off on this, I've got a little thing over on YouTube which comes from a school in Partney. And I'm going to invite you all to watch that. I'm going to paste the link to that up here in the chat box. If you're watching on YouTube after the event, there is a playlist in the window there for you to select. So if it's okay to select this when I say go, we'll watch it together. Well, that's one way of doing it. The way I'd like to do it is if you're in the chat room, so Kate, Sandra, Fraser, Mark, and myself, if you just click over to the left-hand side of your screen, you'll see a YouTube icon there. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can see the YouTube icon? That's great. I'm going to lead you through that in a second. So this is exercise 2 of the rules of the game, and it was to film a shot of a character in 2 different ways from the same camera position. It then goes on to modify it a little bit. Place a character in the frame so that we can see their whole body. Facing the camera, they see something or someone coming towards them from off camera, out of the frame. They step closer and closer towards the camera in order to better see the object or person coming towards them. Film the first shot from wide-angle perspective. Film the second shot with the camera zoomed in to your own preference. So the shot we're going to see is from Partney. Is Partney a school in London, Mark? Is that right?
It's in Lincolnshire.
In Lincolnshire. That's great. So after seeing it, I'll maybe invite you to speak a little bit about it, and then we can all put the microphones up and have a wee quick chat as well. So this is great. It's great to have so many of you here. Thank you so much for coming along. Okay, so here we go. Here's Partney. Sorry, I forgot to unmute my microphone. I do apologise. Ed, can everyone see that film okay? Can you give me a thumbs up if you can see the short film okay? That's great, thank you. Brilliant. So, Mark, if it's okay to ask you to talk about that, you mentioned it in your blog, that you thought the difference between the two shots was quite spectacular, quite remarkable, in that the first one shows elements of the rule of thirds going on, where an image is divided up by 2 lines going that way and 2 lines going that way, which gives us 9 different boxes and is very appropriate for proportioning in the screen. Can you mention a little bit about the contrast between the two exercises there, if you like?
Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Good. So I got a little bit carried away by that shot, by those 2 shots, but I thought that there was just a very marked difference in the effect and the power of the 2 of them, and the second one, which is much wider, and the figure is much smaller in the frame, and you can't see. You can't see the face. It's harder to, and it's darker. That I imagine that's the kind of shot that children might take if they were storyboarding from something from scratch, and they wanted to show a character looking off screen and off camera and being shocked or surprised. So then the requirement for them to reframe. I think makes a very powerful difference, because what's in effect the first shot, the version that comes first is much more effectively composed. I think you see much more of her face. You get a very different sense of proximity to the character and to whatever it is that she's feeling. And exactly like you say, Alistair, it's kind of composed in thirds. So you do get screens and windows and different depths within the shot. So you get a real sense of what the space is, the volume of the space, and the character moving through the space. And I think it's just out of the requirement to reframe and to alter the focal length of the composition to adjust the zoom lens. And it's something that children might not choose a framing or a composition like that unless they're pushed to look at alternatives. So when partly the teacher came back with that and said, "Oh, this is how we did exercise 2," I thought, yeah, that's a kind of vindication of that exercise of why you would do an exercise like that.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Yes, I think that's spectacular. I'm just going to plug my earphones in the background. Sorry, I'm not tickling you all from behind. It's a strange thing to do. What struck me was that if you were working as an editor with a piece of film like that, that gives you a choice of cuts that you could make as well, so that a child or a young filmmaker working in that situation could choose to go from that original, from the second wide shot into the closer shot and get a greater sense of perspective on the place and then the distance between the character and the relation of what they're seeing. So you add in the edit, you add in another element of distance as well, which draws you closer into the story. Which I think it's quite useful. Sandra, Kate, is there anything you would like to say at all on that point there? Kate, I'm going to come to you in a second to talk about your film, but yeah, if you want to unmute your microphone, you're very welcome.
One thing that I thought, can you hear me by the way?
Yeah, very clearly, thank you.
The close-up shot leaves more to the imagination, which I really liked. We can see the details of the eyes looking at what could possibly be there, and then it seemed more kind of a dramatic moment when she came forward and out of shot, because she came quite close to the audience at that point to leave it. And yeah, kind of mirroring what you both have been saying about that wide shot, there is a lot going on. And so there are all these choices suddenly, and yeah, not much for the imagination. It does take a lot longer for the subject to get out of shot.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
There's not much drama going on there. So, yeah,
that's fantastic. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, Sandra, on you go, Sandra.
I've just got to get the phone. I'm sorry.
As you say, Keith, that's one of the fundamental things about filmmaking. There's two things you mentioned there. There's choice. You said in the wider shot there's a lot of more elements of choice. There's a lot of choice to look at. So if you look, for instance, at my room here, a fairly wide shot, there's loads and loads of bits of things and gubbins to look at. We're in the process of moving house again, so it's still, it's all random. But if we're coming much closer, it gives much more to the imagination. Exactly that, and it's leaving space for the imagination that for me is the fundamental thing with the glory of the art forms that we look at, like film and personally theatre and puppetry and radio, is how do you give enough food for the imagination that the participant, the viewer, invests their mind into it, and it opens up another world above them.
Yeah.
This notion of on-screen and off-screen space is fascinating. And last week we also talked very briefly about the notion of magnetism and reverse poles of magnetism. What is it that draws this person to this event going across? It's fascinating. Yeah. Kate, in your own practice, you've been working as a filmmaker with a school in Glasgow, am I right in saying?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you shared with me earlier on this afternoon some clips from the work of the school where they were doing pretty much exactly the same exercise. Could you talk briefly about what their experience was between the different choices of shots and what they actually did with them if they put them into a final edit, how they felt about them as well?
Yeah, to give a quick background about the group, they're really experienced actors, but in theatre. They'd never worked with film before, so we spent a lot of time I spent a lot of time working with them, introducing them to kind of acting for screen and those differences, because the way they use space, so it was really different. They were moving about. There wasn't as much detail, like say we could get from a close-up shot of the face. It was a lot of moving about, so we spent a lot of time trying to refine what they were doing, which was amazing. They're really talented actors, but just trying to remind them about kind of less is more, that kind of thing. So they can really give powerful performances, but for this shot it was we wanted to show the distance between these two characters. One of them's an autistic boy and the other person is a girl who can't control her mood swings. And so it's like bringing them together. And it just happened to coincide with that exercise. It just happened to be similar.
Yes.
So there's the shots show there's quite a lot of distance between the girl and the boy. The boy's sat by a tree, and then the girl is kind of on the approach. She's more standing by the school, so it shows her point of view, and he's kind of like a dot in the distance. So they wanted to show that, and the fact that she was making this gesture of connection coming towards him, and then it shows her walking towards him, distant, in a wide shot, and then they wanted to cut to this closer shot of them both, of her coming and sitting very close to him, and then having this interaction where they both kind of get something out of it and they both grow as characters. So that was interesting because we were working with distance and space.
Yeah.
And they're really good actors, and they kind of learned that it didn't have to be too over the top. It could be small little performances that show so much detail. So that's
fantastic. That's good. And have you put that, have the participants put that into a film yet as well? Have they made a final edit of the film?
Yeah, it's in the editing process. So they wanted to keep that scene quite simple. So it's basically how I described the end thing is the wide going into the close. And that's the final shot of that scene, is the nice close-up of them both, the two shots. So
it's just hearing you talk there. Sorry, can you say that again?
It's been quite an ambitious film because they all wanted to be in it, so it's an ensemble it's a multiple protagonist piece, which normally I would agree to.
Yeah.
So.
It's very, very beautiful. What I saw, it was fantastic. So yeah, I look forward to seeing that on another platform. We haven't shared it on this occasion because of disclosure issues and confidentiality and so on. But it's a very fine piece of work, it must be said. Hearing what you're saying there as well reminds me of this process of intimacy. Film is quite a strange and intimate process in that, you know, there's a camera maker very often, a filmmaker very often, someone hugging a camera, and that's the distance between them there and themselves. And then in the edit, Bruce Block, I think it was. No, it's not Bruce Block. It's Walter Murch talks about moviolas, the early days of modern film editing, and people hunched over these machines, practically part of it. And you get that kind of intimacy of relationship with the creation of film as well, which is very, very interesting. Fraser, as well, if you want to say anything at any point, please do feel free to drop a point in the chat window there at the side, and we can address that, no problems at all. Sandra, is there anything you want to say so far? Hello, Matt Eichking. Is there anything you want to say so far at all?
No, at the moment, just it's really interesting, all that I'm hearing. So I'm not making any films at the moment with young folk, but just really interested in all that you're talking about. So.
Oh, that's great. No, I thought that's fab, and yeah, there's a lot to be. I'm learning a lot doing it as well. It's great. But Fraser's commented here on the side. I know in the YouTube windows we don't see when you're watching it later on. We don't see the comments. So Fraser's commented here on the side. The first take made the unseen thing the girl sees seem more imposing somehow. Couldn't agree more. Exactly that, and it's exactly what Kate says. It leaves space for the imagination. You know, what is it that she sees? Whereas if it's further away, there's kind of more. Yeah, whereas closer up, you get, the same size of reaction, you get a much more powerful thing, and that's the economy of acting in film. Is a remarkable thing. And you could do this exercise again, but look purely at acting, as Mark was suggesting. What is film acting in relation, as Kate suggested, to theatre acting? What are the differences between the two? Very, very interesting field, totally. So that's great. So moving on, I want to look very quickly at a wee bit in depth actually about a film from Japan. This comes from Alain Bergola's selections of clips that analyse and look at distance. And this is from a film called Miss Oyu. Miss Oyu is a love story, a tragic love story, and it's a Japanese film from the 50s, I think it is, and it deals with space and relationships and formal relationships, very formal registers about how people relate to each other, and human emotions in these very rigid, structured intervals of relationship. And what we want to look at this is the geometry of the space and how the drama is suggested through the geometry and the character reaction in it. And if we want to talk about economy and acting, this is really, really precise. These are grand emotions played in the bat of an eyelid. They're extraordinary. It's a great thing. So what Bergola says about it is that his mise en scène is extremely precise, that we could in fact do the whole of L'Intervalle on just the work of Mizoguchi himself. And after we've looked at the clip, we could talk, Mark and I, at the time when we saw it in the Cinematheque, we talked about an exercise that's possible afterwards. We'll maybe mention that as well. I don't know if anyone's done it at all, Mark, but okay. So if you'd like to click over to the YouTube window, I'm just going to copy and paste the Miss Oyu into the here. There we go. So that's if anyone's watching and wants to check through that way. I'm now going to lead it through on this, and it's about. It's about 2 minutes long, so it's 2 minutes into it. If it's not at 2 minutes in, that's where to go to. 2 minutes in. So here we go. I'm just going to advance it. I'm just going to advance it through to 2 minutes here. So let me do that. Okay, so there we go. That was Miss Oyu from Mizugochi there, and I don't know if you noticed in the comment bar that says Mark has forgot his power charger. Now there's an interval of distance if ever I saw one. Mark running for his power charger out the long axis of the shot. Very good. So, Miss Oyu, there's so much you can say about this shot. Sandra, you're welcome to put your microphone back up if you want as well. And Fraser, if there's anything you want to raise, pop it into the comment bar as always. There, no problems at all. There's so much to talk about it. The precision of it is extraordinary. And if you think about it in terms of a geometric shape of numbers, the shot starts from 2 minutes in, that kind of shot of just where we go to the location where we are for the majority of the time. There's one person, and then there's another person comes in, and then there's a third person comes in, and the spacing is just beautiful. We know we can tell there's a relationship there and there, as Mark says in the comments at the side, that you don't have to speak Japanese to get the sense of this. It's a love triangle. We get the feeling of that, and the intensity of the emotions is remarkable by the body language, but it's so restrained and so. They're about to erupt. If that was, a stereotypically in another nation, it'd be a lot louder, and it's very bold. So it's this restrained things that are beautiful, and the economy of the camera movement as it tracks from place to place is just beautiful. It's almost like another character there going, oh, and watching it with you. It allows you to feel it. The camera doesn't really do very much beyond a little bit of tracking, and it's so simple. And before I rabbit on, I'd like to hear what everyone else has to say. Let's start. Sandra, what did you see there?
I think there's such a restraint in, the camera moving and the way that actors are placed. It just creates that tension, doesn't it? It's like a tightrope in some kind of way. I think it just creates that emotion, that tension.
Exactly. So, yeah, there's a real tension in the space. The space is the tension, which is an extraordinary thing. So bodies in space and the environment they find themselves in propose a tension. And the placement of the mise-en-scène of it is extraordinary. Kate, is there anything you want to say at all?
Yeah, I'd agree with what Sandra's saying. That tension and restraint, I've got that definitely. And yeah, placement, for sure. There was one particular moment where you could see the woman standing go from it. She was almost going to go towards the man and then held back. And it was like you saw in that gesture how much she was holding back, but also how much she knew him and that she shouldn't. And yeah, you can really read into those little moments. So that's what I was getting from it.
It's epic human drama played out in very, very tight space, very tight details of those tiny footsteps. I mean, it's beautiful when she starts to come down towards it. Oh, yeah, you're right. It's remarkable. Mark, what did you see in that yourself?
I really like that comment of Sandra's that it's like a tightrope. That you feel as though the three characters are all in the same, not just the same plane, but they're on the same kind of thin line. And there's a kind of struggle to stay balanced, but between the three of them, and that somehow they all depend on each other. That their ability to maintain any poise or equilibrium is completely dependent on each other. So if one of them swings emotionally further than another, then everybody falls off. And this guy in the foreground who's got his head in his hands for most of the time, it's so melodramatic, and it's not when you think of the stereotype of Japanese cinema being about restraint, it's not restrained. It's very, very powerful, but contained, contained emotional power. It's still very expressive. But without being, kind of wildly, Almodovar-like excess emotion. It's still very powerfully communicated rather than invisible. It's made very visible, but in very restrained ways.
I would argue that that's actually a much more realistic representation of human passions on screen than something like Almodovar, because in reality, if you think about the more traumatic or impassioned moments of your life, very often they're basically moments of, fine, no, that's great, no, tiny things, and it's much more human, much more realistic. And whereas we're used to the over theatricality of the Hollywood movie and what have you, but in reality, most of us are like, grand, yes. Tony Zhao has a fantastic episode of his Every Frame a Painting, looking at the staging of a Kurosawa movie, and it's a scene in an office space about someone embezzling money, and he plays it out between two characters and the shapes they make in it. That's very, very worth checking out. I'll find a link to that and put it in the comments in the emails and the the YouTube thing. There's two things that come up for me for this as well. The first, I know this is quite random, but my son, who's 4, nearly 5, and I were sitting watching some Doctor Who, 1960s Doctor Who, black and white with Patrick Troughton the other day. He's obsessed with these things. And there was a very, very similar shooting going on in Doctor Who. And it was the economy of the movement of the camera and the spacing of the people was there to kind of make the most of very, very limited means. And it did. It completely held us. These very simple, profound filmmaking abilities really hold us in as audience members. We get drawn in and drawn in. And the more we give into using technology or showing off or fast cutting, depending on what you want to do, it can lose the skill of some of these kind of scenes. So how do you play with your actors in that scene? What happens if you cut away with your actors and say stop? It's interesting. I think it's nice to let things play out in little bits and then work with it. The other thing that came to mind is that there is my training that I did in Paris in theatre talks about the notion of justified things being justified or right, and this is a gut feeling. And within this clip, there's a lot of moments juste, justified moments, right moments, and it's to do with entrances. How does a character enter a space, and at what moment? What moment is their entrance justified? And Mizuguchi and Ozu Misoyu is just fantastic. The way that he has the characters arriving at just the right moment. If they came too early, the scene would kind of break for us. We wouldn't get the flow of it. If they came too late, the tension that Sandra talks of, this tightrope, would be too flaccid. We wouldn't get it. It would be this floppy thing. So the question of how you get characters into scene and those moments of movement and justification of those is so precise, and that's something very, very worthwhile looking at. When you're watching films that you've made with people, go, what would happen if I put that a beat later? Think about beats rather than seconds. Wait 2 seconds. Trying to find what a beat is for your working with a group. How does that work? And if you find that justified entrances, suddenly the person has the right to be there, the right to speak. And that becomes very interesting because you've got an entirely justified system going on. Otherwise, it's an inconsistent system, and it just doesn't quite make sense. So that's maybe more of a theatrical perspective, but working with Mizuguchi there, I think it's quite justified. Is there anything anyone wants to say before we move on to the next clip at all? Is there anything anyone wants to say as a final point there? Oh, Fraser, thank you, I see this. Fraser says, I like the physical shapes the actors make with the set, and the way the people in the background do the talking, leaving the foreground character to just use expression. Yes, he's in reaction all the time, literally with his hand and his head's rocking, his head in his hands, rocking back and forth, and just sitting there, it's remarkable. The drama is spread. There's a tension in the space. Yeah, it's extraordinary. Sorry, anyone else? Anything to say before we wind up on that excerpt?
I just wanted to say, I think what you said about this thing, I don't know, about fast cutting versus, kind of the long take. And from doing the long take stuff last year, it's really sort of changed the way I kind of look at cutting, editing, and the finished piece. So it's just, when you brought that up, it made me think what I've been thinking about lately. It's, you can have all of the different shots and the footage, but you don't necessarily have to, cut away to something unless it's the right moment. It's like figuring out that right moment and for it to be the right time. And I guess I've been looking at that with this group as well, and showing them how to cover a scene, but trying to work with them and find out what they think about what to show, what not to show, and how close to go to the characters, and when should we have a distant shot. And yeah, just looking at that clip that you've just shown, the physicalness to it, the three presences so strong. Yeah, it's a really good example, I think, to show a class.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's one of the things we talked about in Paris, was the notion of building an exercise out of this clip, which is map out the space, look at the space and map it out, and then map out where the characters go. What is their path of action through the space? And what does the camera do within that space as well? Get a group to then step through those movements, and then get them to improvise dialogue based around those movements and those character relations, and see what happens as a result of that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very simple but very precise exercise to see what is that. And again, the notion of justification, it's justified by the movement. It's peculiar.
Mm.
And also, to pick up on what you said there, Kate, as well, that's why I love the filmmaking environment and career, is that it's a constant learning thing. It's amazing. There's no kind of like, yes, I know it all now. It's like I'm wandering around in the mist going, half the time, and you just build these series of ideas and things, and it's beautiful, this kind of constant evolution. And that's, Fraser, that's why it's so important that there's so many different levels and around. We all learn from each other. It's great. I'm chuffed to bits. It's a very giving thing. So that's a practical exercise to use. Mark, sorry, you were going to say something.
No.
Cool. Yeah, so that's an exercise to play with there. So the next, oh yes, that was one more thing I wanted to say before we do move on. Fields of play, zones of play. If you watch Miss OU there, as Sandra said, that there's action taking place up the back. You've got to find where are the places where you can play. Where is it justified for someone to play in the space? Is that the right place? What does that propose? Like maybe on levels, or what are the different? Some places play and don't, other places don't, and that, I mean, that they have an ability for you to be in there and communicate. Other spaces less so, maybe behind a bookcase or whatever. That's a very poor example. But what are zones of play within that? So from a theatrical perspective, you might find on top of a table suddenly is actually a good place to change the space and play from, or a bit of stage up there, a bit of stage down there. So that's a notion to play with. So just zones of play, fields of play. Our next clip is going to come from Chaplin. I'm not going to show a Chaplin clip every week, but I'm a big silent comedy fan, but I want to get Harold Lloyd in there somewhere. This is a clip from a film called The Kid, and this is Chaplin's first long putting, his first longer film, and it's, as with much of Chaplin's movies, they're about emotion, and he comes from a melodramatic background of Victorian theatre, and the music hall where the emotions are played out large on stage, and you're ridden by the emotions of the actors on stage, but he does it so well in so many cases that you completely get it. And this film, I watched this with my wee man when he was 3, and we sat together, and he was just sitting streaming with tears down his face and watching it. And it was just the most wonderful thing that 104 years later or whatever, we still get this incredible emotional ride from this film. We relate to it. And when we're watching this from the perspective of distance, this is about separation, being pulled apart, and the pursuit back of that. The story is that Chaplin, the tramp character, finds a child in the street, is about to put it down the gutter, but he decides against it. He finds a baby, and he then raises the baby, and they have adventures together of a comic kind, and eventually the city come to know that he has this child and it's not his, and how can a tramp be looking after a child? So they come to take the child away from him, and the child the kid is just devastated, utterly devastated, and it's about their struggle to get back together, and I think it's got great drama in it. So if you'd like to click over to the YouTube window now, if that's okay, and in fact, before you do that, I'm just going to paste it into the side here if anyone's watching on, oh, there's the other one there. On there, yeah. So if you go to the YouTube window, I'm just going to advance it, and here we go.
Keep it warm for me.
Get back to the other side of the room.
Okay, so that was, I must say, that was a Bergala choice. That's not just my choice. That was one that Bergala himself selected. Gosh, I'm fascinated by that clip. I think it's just so, it's overplayed and overdramatic, but at the same time, this is a kid that's been taken away from its father. It's just been dragged from its father, and the rooftop chase sequence, I think there's something remarkable in it. There's this bit here, I'm going to say, I don't know if this will work, but I'm going to try and put it back to 2 minutes and 16 seconds, where you can see, let's have a look, 2 minutes 16 seconds, there's just this brilliant shot of him being on the roof. There you go, I don't know, can you all see that?
Yeah.
Him being on the roof looking for the kid in the police van as it comes past. There's the city wagon coming down through there. There's this great tension in the space of them moving around. I just think it's really quite remarkable. Is there anything anyone wants to say? And please feel free to disagree with me and go, no, it's absolute nonsense. But, is there anything anyone wants to say about that one at all?
Me? Can I speak?
Of course, Mark, on you go.
How do you say you want to speak? You just do it, don't you?
Yeah.
I was. It's a really interesting. That shot that you picked out is really interesting because the art form is about, in terms of editing and narrative and storytelling, it's about 15 years old at this point. So it's very, very new. And what Chaplin's doing in that shot is just extraordinary. There is a huge distance between the kid and Chaplin at that point, but you see them less than an inch apart on the frame. It's such pictorial proximity, but they are so far apart narratively, and so being able to pick that vantage point and want to put the object of his pursuit in the same frame is just an incredible thing to do, really sophisticated thing to do. And I've watched this clip loads and loads of times, and I just hadn't clocked that at all until you pulled it out, until you picked on it. It's amazing.
I think Chaplin is one of the greatest filmmakers of all time. I'm a huge fan. I do have problems with his films as well, but I think there's a lot of really, really great stuff in there. Yeah, that's as you see, the physical proximity on how our eyes perceive it, and then the actual distance of that is extraordinary. And that's something to come back to. We're not. I was wanting to look at another clip later on from Bridges of Madison County tonight, but I think we'll leave it fairly soon. But that's what they do in Madison County is there's a crucifix that comes into shot at one point, and that symbolises a view between the characters and their ideology, and how that ideology is forcing this other character away from something as well. So distances by space and idea are very, very interesting as well. So it's great. Kate, what were you going to say? Sorry.
Me?
Yeah.
I wasn't going to say anything.
Oh.
I did. I really enjoyed it. I'm not sure which place that shot is. I didn't get it when you showed it again, so I'll go back and look at that and hopefully be overjoyed.
It's a remarkable thing. It's because it's been so long. There's this kind of faffing about with the physical. This is again boxing. This kind of physical thing of punching, which is also a distance thing. You want to make contact, but then you get this getting up onto the roof to get elevation to see the world out. It's just, I think there's a sensational journey that the audience goes on with it as well, particularly if you see it in the context of the film, where your emotions have gone this very stable journey of they're together, this is lovely, nothing can happen, and then they're torn apart. They're physically torn apart. It's just great. Really good. Fraser, if there's anything you want to say, please do feel free to pop it in the chat there. And Sandra, is there anything you want to say about that clip at all?
No, just full of admiration. It's just amazing, really. I watched this with the film club last year at Atlanta, and it is an incredible film. It is very emotional. And,
yeah, it's justified. It's a justified emotional thing. One of the things I thought was very interesting, being a Chaplin fan, as I say, is that shot where you see Jackie Coogan, the actor, standing in the back of the van, crying out like that, crying. That was what had happened. Was that his father had told him, right, if you don't do this shot well enough, we're going to take you away from Charlie, and you'll never see him again. So the horror really existed for the boy. He was just very conscious of it. Yeah! So that's the change on emotions of the actor. And working with actors like that, I don't recommend it at all. But and to tie into what you're saying there, Mark, as well, that's right. Film at that point was it is about 100 years ago, that film. I think it's 1915, 1916 it was released or something like that. No, it was such a young medium. They're playing around and experimenting with things. And as you see, to get up there and to just suddenly get that perspective, that's a unique perspective that the man had. It's quite something. Yes. Brilliant. Well, I was going to show one more clip, but I think it's quite a long clip, so maybe save it for next time. And it goes into slightly different territory as well. The drama of the kid is about getting them back together. This distance being the drama and getting closer together. Romantic films, if you think about it, a romantic film is about getting people together. It's about a decreasing distance and getting together for whatever purpose, for that first screen kiss or whatever. A horror movie, likewise, is also someone trying to get up behind someone else and catch up with the label. Whereas a spy movie is about trying not to be seen, being seen. This distance is very, very interesting in its dramatic forms it proposes. Is there anything anyone wants to say about what we've seen tonight before I talk about the exercise we'll look at next week?
No.
That's grand. So, if you're watching this on YouTube later on and you have a group that you want to work with, or if anyone here wants to work with this group, work with a group, this is the exercise that I propose for the next time, and it's a film that exists. The results exist on your blog, I think, Mark, of the exercise 3. That's where we'll look at it next week. We'll look at one of the exercises from there. But the exercise is as following: film the following scene in 3 different ways: a static long take, a moving long take, and using montage, cut and edit a sequence of shots together. The scene is as follows. Character A passes something to character B, which produces a tension between them, leading to their separation. Now, the only thing that can change between the versions of the shot is the actors. It's got to keep the same story and location. You've got to keep all dialogue to a minimum, and the scene should last 1 to 2 minutes maximum. So that's a scene to be filmed in 3 different ways. First, as a static long take. Second, as a moving long take. And third, using montage to cut and edit a sequence of shots together. So it ties into, Kate, what you were saying as well earlier on there, that you can see the learning journey of the filmmaker going on within that exercise. And it doesn't, what's lovely is it doesn't propose anything saying this is a better way or that's a better way. It just says, do it, have a look, and make of it what you will. So I think it's quite an interesting exercise. If anyone has any questions arising from this session, please feel free to either pop them into the YouTube the YouTube page there, or send them to me in an email at alsatch@gmail.com. That's ALSATCH @gmail.com. I think we'll round it off for the evening there, if that's okay. And Fraser, thank you very much again for joining us in. That's fantastic. It's great to have you there as well. And Sandra, lovely to see you. Kate, great to see you. Mark, great to see you as well. Thank you all very much for your time. And yeah, is there anything anyone wants to say before we go at all?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, we'll see you all soon.
Bye.
Thank you, man. Have a look at it. Cheers.